I'm here, yes. Great. I'm just going to hand the floor over to you and let us know when you'd like for us to change the slides.
Okay, great. Yeah, and I know I'm the last one, so I'll try to make up a little bit of time. But I want to just echo the comments. It's been a phenomenal, to share the company as far as presenting today. The presentations have been fantastic. So thanks to all of the speakers. So I'm Julie Vargas. I lead global market development for the food sector at a company called Avery Dennison. We're an 85-year-old manufacturing company. Basically, we make a lot of sticky stuff, so self-adhesive labels. But I actually lead a group of technology professionals who are working on intelligent label technologies specifically for the food segment. So think smart sensors, building out efficiencies and new retail models in the food supply chain. It is a global team, so I have a team here in the U.S., also in Europe, China, and Japan. And so for point of reference, I actually traveled about a little over 400,000 miles last year. Have not traveled more than 500 this year, not only because of COVID, but also because I had the birth of my second daughter the first week in lockdown this year as well. So that's a little bit about me. I think if we jump to the next slide, I'll go ahead and tee up what we're talking about today. So essentially, when we were thinking about, what are some of the topics, I think there's a lot of really deep topics. The one on emotional intelligence is fantastic. Tanya's tips around being successful were amazing. I have pages and pages of notes. I'm going to go deep on something that I think is of interest to almost all of us in some place in our life, and that's around being the only. And so there's a lot of places where people will talk about kind of what are some of the things we need to do to get more diverse environments and what are some of the egregious, disadvantages that are out there specifically for women, right, building their professional career. I'm not going to talk about any of those today. I'm going to talk about some of the smaller things that happen that hold us back or potentially impact our confidence when we are the only in the room. So if you'll go to the next slide, the first thing I want to do is just remind us a little bit of how far we have come. And so I think, the biggest thing to call out here on the right-hand side, you'll see a beautiful woman. That is my grandma. And so she is one of the women who chose to sign up to be a Marine during World War II. She actually saw the poster that you see to the left here. And it's just a reminder that in 2 generations, we have made quite a bit of progress. We have made a lot of strides to move from being the, allowed to join or, there to free up someone to do something that's deemed more important into having our own voice and our own seat at the table. And I think that's extremely important. One of the quotes from today, I think from Tanya was to look back and see all the mountains we've scaled. We've scaled quite a few over these 2 generations. But if you'll go to the next slide, I'd also like to point out that we still have a ways to go. So there is a lot of representation that's starting to happen across the corporate world. But when you look at women in S&P 500 companies, you still see the numbers start to dwindle the further up that pyramid you go. So when you talk about board seats in particular, you're only talking about, 21%. And then when you get into CEOs, it's less than 6% of them are women. So in many places, we are starting to feel that we are not fully represented. So what does that mean to us when we're looking around the room? So go to the next slide for me. I did a lot of reading. I have a lot of stats. If you want to geek out over those stats another day, we can do that. But today I thought it would be really interesting just to share a couple of stories. So again, these are not egregious bias moments where someone says, you can't do that because you're a woman. Those are really easy to spot. Those are really clear to understand. And they're wrong, and we should call them out, and we should not tolerate working anywhere that doesn't have the moral ethics to make sure that those things don't happen. This is not that. This is a couple of stories about just what it feels like from a confidence perspective or from an experience perspective when you are the only. Now in this picture that you're looking at, you'll actually find there's, if you want to do a little bit of a where's the other woman moment. There is one more in this picture, but you will see there's a sea of ties as well. So this is from a trade show that takes place every year in New York. This is our team that was there to present, and the story I want to tell you about was what happened, the same day that morning. So the night before, everyone meets up for dinner. It's great. We're in town. We're ready to have a successful event to share the learnings of our technology with potential customers and current customers at this trade show. But the night before, everyone made plans, right? Let's go out and go for a run the next morning. I thought, oh, great, I'd love to go for a run. Sounds like a good team building kind of moment. Until we started looking at times, and so everyone said, well, I think we can do this probably about 30 minutes before breakfast. Now, if some of you weren't on mute, I'm sure I would hear a few snickers of, really, 30 minutes? So the plan was to run for 20 minutes, take a quick shower, and be down in time for breakfast. Well, obviously that worked for a lot of my colleagues, but it did not work for me. So I got up an hour and a half earlier than that, did what I needed to do. I went on the run by myself, and the whole time I'm fuming, and I couldn't figure out why. And I think it's just one of those moments where, again, going back to some of the emotional intelligence, kind of digging into what I was feeling, it's that moment of realizing that, you are alone sometimes. You are the only one in that scenario. And so I missed out on the camaraderie of what the guys got to do later that morning, right? And so there are moments like that where you feel isolated. From my perspective, I think, to share my experience, it does make it harder. Now to build those relationships, I had to go out and intentionally find moments where I could build a bridge, build a conversation, build the actual, relationships that I couldn't just build in a moment where the whole team was together without me. And that's important to recognize, because I think the other thing that happens in these scenarios is there's really good intention sometimes around making sure the team is inclusive. But when they do that, they oftentimes look to the person who is the only or one of the only to solve the problem. So in a lot of places, in this industry, I work at the intersection of technology and manufacturing. And in a lot of cases, there's just not even recognition that some of the structures that are put in place tend to be exclusive. Another good story was a different trade show at a different point in time. I was standing there ready to answer questions. It was earlier in my career. And I was standing there ready to answer questions. I am versed up, down, sideways on radio frequency identification. And someone walked up to me and directly said, oh, hi, who can I talk to and learn more about this technology? And in my naive youth, I said, well, me, of course, right? Who else would you want to talk to? Didn't even dawn on me, it didn't occur to me that they didn't think that I, one, worked there, or two, had any knowledge of the things that my team was responsible for presenting. Another good example of that is walking the same show. I actually led a team. I led someone who was probably, at the time, 25 years my senior in the company, but I was his direct leader. And every time we stopped to speak to somebody about something that they were working on, they always directed their answers towards him. And so there's a moment where you also realize that whether or not it's direct conversation about your authority in a scenario, there are moments where when they don't expect you to be the one that's actually leading something, or you don't fit the profile, or you aren't the person they're expecting to see, that they do turn attention or turn authority to someone else. So it's a few examples here. If we'll go to the next slide, we'll talk about why that matters. So when you look, this is actually a great study done by McKinsey, and I'm happy to share the article with everyone. I think one of the things that we oftentimes do is we look to make sure that there's someone representing in the room, right? Which is fine. But one of the stats that's really interesting when you dig into this is that when there's only one, there tends to be even increased discrimination. It's even a worse experience. So there's some small actions you can take to actually cluster women together, or make sure that you have structured environments where women are supporting other women on project teams or in the office. to drive increased engagement and make sure that you are reducing the number of microaggressions that are happening across the course of business. So some of these that are here, I'm sure some folks on the phone have probably experienced before, but again, mistaken for someone more junior, that's the one we just talked about. But also even just things like having your judgment questioned or being perceived as the one, right? The one that we have to have here, so we have someone here kind of scenario, which has happened before as well. All of this is really critical to making sure that we are successful as companies. Of course, there's lots of studies out there as to why it's really important that you have not just diversity in the makeup of your teams, but diversity in thought to drive innovation across the board. And so there's some key work that we're doing, if we'll go to the next slide, that we all can play a role in on where and how we can start to empower each other, empower our teams, and ultimately build capabilities across our organizations. So these are the things that we talk about when it comes to advocates and allies. I work for a phenomenal company. We have a phenomenal team that's focused heavily on diversity and inclusion. And one of the things that we look at specifically around gender is some of what you'll see here. Now, unfortunately, there's still quite a bit of work to do, but one of the things that I think is so important around all of these is that they're not just about women supporting other women. Critical, absolutely critical. But the other big important factor is around making sure that you have male advocates and allies in the journey as well. So the first thing that we talk about is speaking up. So this one sounds pretty straightforward. I think actually Anita mentioned this directly in one of her answers. Just speak up, say what you want. That's critical. Making sure that you express what you want, that you're seeking out your mentors, say what you want to do. That is beyond important for all of us. The other thing that's really great is finding someone who is speaking up for others, or finding someone that can speak up on your behalf. If you have an ally in a meeting that's watching out for some of the classic pitfalls, the person that interrupts, the person that repeats your idea, and somehow gets full credit for it, having a good ally to watch out for those moments is really important. And when that ally speaks up, it has incredible consequence and impact to the entire group. So, for example, in one meeting I was in, someone was explaining something and was interrupted probably twice, and finally someone stopped and said, "Wait, I really want to hear what she's saying." And then another one, that I've used before is, "Hey, tell me a bit more about how that's different from the idea that, Heather just explained," for example. This is something that I think we all do, and we all can continue to do to support each other. The other one is just being aware of bias. So this one happens in small moments. One of the ones that I use very often is a leadership development review, and we're talking about kind of the future of some of the team and what roles they would be best fit for. And one of the comments was, "Well, that role has a lot of travel, and she has 2 small kids, so I'm not sure if that's really something she wants to do." And while I think the intent behind that was fair, the thing that no one pointed out was that he also had 2 small kids. And in the end, using our bias to make decisions around what opportunities we give to people and what opportunities they want to take, it's not our place to make those decisions. And calling those out and saying something as simple as, "It's not our decision to make, it's for her to decide or him to decide," is something that's, that we all take responsibility for and ownership in every day. Another one is mentor and sponsor women. So this one I'm sure we've all talked about. I think one of the biggest places for this is around the next generation that's coming up. Tanya just mentioned when we're talking about the female youth across the workforce. They come in with such incredible ideas, incredible energy, and that's something that I think we can nurture and harness. And sometimes the environments that they're walking into are not as prepared to be a growth mindset as they are. And it's really important that we make sure that they have the space, the energy, and the support to really drive their ideas as big as they are and not have to change the way to communicate them, or change the way that they express who they are in that process. And that goes not only for women, that goes for everyone coming into the workforce. The other one is measure progress. This one's really key. I think that, at the end of the day, a lot of people notice. this. And so one of the things that's really, everyone can feel, everyone thinks that they're doing the right thing and they don't have their own biases. There's a great project by Harvard called the Implicit Bias Project and Implicit Bias, Project. And if you check it out, it's really, really interesting how so many of us have biases that we're not even aware of. And so really measuring and making sure that your teams are looking for, rewarding, and ultimately understanding how they're evolving, not just to include people, but to make the table bigger, to have a bigger diversity of thought, and to really drive change in the corporate environment is key. Without the right pipeline, without the right team structure, we'll never get to a place where we truly have diverse ways of thinking and innovating across the organization. Identify talent and potential. I'm sure you have heard the stat that men apply for a job when they only meet about 60% of the qualifications. But women usually don't apply unless they meet 100% of them. And so even when they do, many experts say that women oftentimes lack confidence in their ability. And because of that, they will have less swagger about those capabilities. So sometimes you'll hear interview stories about, well, I'm not sure that so-and-so is a good fit. I'm not sure that so-and-so fits the culture, or has the right attitudes. And a lot of times what's happening is we're profiling a role, or we're profiling a person's, the type of role. I'm in a commercial role today. So again, intersection of tech, manufacturing, and sales. There's a certain sense of what a sales guy should be, or what a tech person should know. And so it's really, really important that as we're looking at our teams, as we're looking at the future generations, that we're talking about talent and potential and the ability to grow into something that can drive success in ways that look very different, or can be measured different, or expressed differently from the way that they've always been. The last one is the one that's most important to me. I think, just to come full circle, I'm being aware of emotional intelligence, understanding what's happening, understanding where you are and what's going on this year has been one to test us all. But at the end of the day, we all have some type of privilege. We should be aware of it, and we should use it, whether it's time in the company, whether it's age, whether it's race, gender, whether it's any of the abilities, whatever it may be. Use your privilege. One of my favorite quotes from Dalai Lama is, basically you got to know the rules so you can break them effectively. And ultimately, anyone in a place of privilege is in a place to help break the rules, change the game, and give new opportunities. Like I said, expanding that table. It's not about replacing someone in a seat. It's about bringing more chairs. It's about understanding where and how we can ultimately send the elevator back down and bring up more people to the same level, to the same capability, to the same access and opportunity. And when you do that, it's really amazing to see the growth and the opportunities that your company can explore. So if you'll go to the next slide. I'm going to go ahead and wrap up. I skipped a couple of stats, but I did just want to make sure that I don't go too far over here. One thing I will leave you with, though, is that 45% of men and 28% of women believe that 1 woman in 10 is enough diversity. 1 is not enough. Studies show that being the only causes us to really hinder our capability to move forward and expand innovation, expand results. But then ultimately, 2 has to be the minimum. But to quote Ruth Bader Ginsburg, when there are 9, that's when there will be enough. I think if you look at the left side of the screen, those are my 2 daughters. If I think about the world where my grandma got on that train from Detroit, Michigan down to Camp Lejeune with her marine-issued lipstick, 2 generations ago, the hopes that she had for her daughter, her granddaughter, and now her great-granddaughters is that ultimately we would live in a world where we had opportunities and the ability to grant opportunities to others and to lead a position in this life and in work that contributes all that we can where we can. And I think each one of us will play a role in that. And when you look here, experts will predict that by 2030 we'll be at parity. Half of the CEO positions in the Fortune 500 will be women. All of us play a role in that. I think my other favorite quote is from Margaret Thatcher. We may have to fight a battle more than once to win it, but I truly believe that we are all part of that journey. And so I will fight every day to make sure that my daughters have that opportunity. If you look at where we are in 2020, right now there's only 37. So there's a lot left to do. I believe we're all part of that battle, but I truly also believe that when you know the impact of being the only, then you can start to surround others and bring others, mentor, formal, informal, into the fold. There's a lot of great opportunities we can lead, develop, and drive, not just for our generation, but for those that follow. Thank you.
And thank you, Julie. What an amazing presentation. I'm just always so shocked that when I see these figures, today there are 37. With all the things that we've advanced and made advancements in the world, there are literally only 37 CEO women in Fortune 500. I just can't even, it's hard for me to it just seems so unbelievable. And I appreciate, that you putting that up there and, just saying to everyone that's listening to this call that everybody's that's going to, watch this recording, we all can make an impact. And I think we could all do a better job in trying to, help other women. So thank you so much for this presentation. It's awesome. If anybody has a live question, you can hit *6 on your keypad now and ask that live question. And while we're waiting, Julie, I'll go and see for any questions that have been typed in.
Thanks, Shelley.
Hi, this is Donna Edmondson, and I have a quick question. There's 37 women as top CEOs, and experts predict by 2030. So how does that culture shift come about to get to that point?
Yeah, it's a great question. Thank you. Yeah, and I can share out the article, but there's a couple of places. One is having the right, pipeline, making sure one of the biggest challenges for women to go to senior leadership is P&L experience, to really be able to manage a balance sheet across the company. And when they did further research around that, they found that those were oftentimes stretch opportunities, and women either weren't applying for them or weren't considered for them. So that they believe is one of the direct opportunities to get women closer to the board of directors or to the CEO role. But the other is just sheer awareness. So I think that the bias piece and really not understanding that sometimes what is deemed qualities of leadership are inherently gender biased. And so some of this will need to also be a cultural shift, not just around the capabilities and the performance of a leader, but what an authentic leader can look like. Women tend to lead from the center. Women also tend to be told to kind of act more like their male counterparts when they get into leadership roles, which tends to lend to being non-authentic, which is also another hindrance that comes out during the growth process, which is why you see that pyramid kind of dwindle when you start to get above first and mid-level managers into executive and board seats. A lot of times there's not a lot of openness to what that profile of person can look like, not from a gender perspective, but from a profile of experience, action, and competency, basically.
Thank you very much.
Oh, sorry about that, Donna.
Hi, my name is Christina. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yeah. Hi, I had a question. How do you balance young children and your leadership roles?
Great question, Christina.
By the way.
Okay. Thank you.
I have a 10-month-old.
Oh, congratulations.
Yeah, I have
congratulations.
Thank you. I was a little more fortunate than you because I was able to have him right before COVID hit. So, but anyhow, So I have a 28-month-old and a 10-month-old. They're 18 months apart. I do have a full-time nanny, and I have a husband that's extremely supportive. But how do you do it? Like, I feel some days I am juggling, so I'm a physician, and I'm juggling the physician role, opening multiple businesses, and making sure that I'm a good wife and a good mother and a good daughter and a good friend, and trying to keep it all together and amidst this pandemic. So how do you do it?
I don't. I'm going to be very, very open and transparent. I tried. I did try. So two things. One, I had to let go of what I defined as what I wanted to be in all of those roles. I had to let myself be a different version than what I had originally thought. I will tell everyone I'm a recovering perfectionist. It is something that I've dealt long and hard look in the mirror. It's not an easy thing. I don't have balance. And what I mean by that is I try not to do any of those at the same time. So it's not always possible. So I'll just preface this by saying this is my best practice. Everyone will need to find their own. There are weeks when I don't sleep enough. There are weeks when I don't get an ounce of exercise, and there are weeks when I have cookies for lunch. But for the most part, my way of dealing with it, just knowing I'm an extreme behavior person, is when I'm working, I am all into work, and I lean on my husband and my child care in those moments. And I know I can't step foot outside of that boundary, or I will hug my baby and not come back. But when the minute I do leave, I don't take my work phone with me. I don't take any of it with me, and I really concentrate and focus. And it may only be a few hours a day, but I spend that really focused on my husband and my children to the best of my ability. And I try my best to also take care of myself. But I'll be honest, that's usually the third string. So I haven't found a lot of easy ways other than asking for help, not being afraid to ask for help, and letting yourself be a version of all of those things, knowing that all three of those add up to something bigger than just being one perfect. Because perfect is not attainable, and letting go of the guilt and the things that fall through the cracks as, oh well, another learning is the only way I get through it.
Thank you for sharing your experience. Yeah, it's definitely.
Find out, let me know.
I, like you, am a perfectionist, and so I want to give 110% to everything I, commit to. So it's definitely a juggle. And I also exercise 6 times a week, and so sometimes I just get up early, but it is a balance. And sometimes working 100 hours a week, because I do a lot of night call. But anyhow, I'm always intrigued by how other women before me have done it or are currently doing it.
Yeah, so the good news is I think the more we support each other and share those experiences, I really appreciated Tracy sharing earlier too. I think we all have our version of kind of the gives and takes. And so just knowing we aren't the only ones making the gives and takes, and to letting go of some of the things that we don't get done that we had on the reality is our to-do list is always really ambitious, and there's always something that doesn't get done and is not checked off yet. So just being at peace with kind of the flow of that. Again, not something I have to actually actively work at that, but I do think the more we share our experiences with each other as female leaders, I think the more empowerment we'll have to realize that, yeah, sometimes my 4-year-old's going to be on my Zoom call, and sometimes I may be working emails at 2 in the morning, and then other times I'm not going to touch anything over the weekend. That's my time with my family. So just being strong in that, and understanding we're still strong leaders. We're still achieving significant things. I think it's about the marathon, not the sprint.
Great point, for sure. Well, thank you. Great presentation. Really enjoyed it.
Thank you. And would anybody else like to ask a question? If you would, it would be *6 on your keypad to unmute.
Can you guys hear me?
We can hear you.
Yeah, my name is Susan Pope. I work at Southwest Research Institute. And one of the things that This has been a great discussion. I've enjoyed everything. One of the things I've heard recently is instead of thinking of it as balancing, think of it as setting boundaries. And I don't know who was talking about you give 100% to whatever you're doing. I think that's one of the key things to really think about because it's never going to be balanced. But you can,
I love that, Susan.
Something you can do is you can set boundaries. And so you said, whenever I'm working, I'm 100% in my work. Whenever I'm on the weekend, I'm 100% into my weekend. That's been super, super critical for me. I mean, I only have one child and a wonderful husband who's supportive, but I'm a director and I have a lot of responsibilities at work. But once I started thinking of it that way, that really helped me out.
I agree. I love that, Susan. That's really good advice.
Absolutely. Very good advice. Would anybody else like to make a comment before we close out for the day or have a question? Okay, I think that we've answered, or sorry, Julie, you've answered all the questions that have come in, and I will go ahead and close out the meeting for today. And I just want to personally thank you, you and all the other keynotes and the panelists for being a part of this.
Thanks, Shelley. Thanks, everyone.
All right, great. So, San Antonio, thank you so much for tuning in to this webinar. And we're, wanting to get back live and be a part, in the venues like we were before and have those open discussions. Everything that's come out of this meeting today has been great. I'm so fortunate to be a part of these meetings because I can hear all this great advice and learn and take away all this knowledge from each one of these webinars. So there's something that I've been doing lately to try to contribute back from what I learned so far. And this comes from every single meeting, kind of like a compilation of themes that have come out of each meeting, and they pretty much repeat themselves. So I'm going to read you off the list in closing. They are in no order of importance because they all are important. So here they go. Take a break. Walk away. Communication. That also means listening to others. We are all human. Forgive yourself. Ask for help. Delegate. Reach out. Do not be afraid of change. Ask questions. And lastly, do something for you. So again, thank you, each and every one of you, for your time and contribution today.